There's something strange about the way time reshapes how we see the past. In the silence after someone leaves, it feels like the door has closed for good, like you have become nothing more than a finished chapter in a story they've outgrown. But memory? It doesn't honor timelines. It doesn't follow logic. It bends, it filters, it softens, until what once felt final begins to echo again. Not with facts, but with feeling. And sometimes the person who walked away finds themselves haunted, not by what they escaped, but by what they can't seem to forget. Because silence, it doesn't just sit in the background, it amplifies everything they tried to bury. It brings clarity they never asked for, and it turns absence into a mirror. So if you've ever wondered whether your absence even matters, if you've questioned whether they'll ever feel the quiet cost of walking away, this message is for you. Start this journey right now. We're about to explore the hidden emotional forces memory awakens in someone who thought they could forget you, not through fantasy, but through quiet truths. Truths that reveal why, over time, you become the one thing they never expected to miss, the man they never thought they'd lose. If today's message stirred something real, drop a 1. If you're still sitting with it, drop a 2. I'm here, I'm listening. Like this video, subscribe to Stoic Station, and stay with me, because what you're about to hear next might just change the way you see silence forever. Now, let's dive in. 1. Memory makes you irreplaceable. She didn't miss you in the beginning, not the real you at least. What she missed was the concept of liberation, the rush of stepping into something unknown, the fantasy of starting fresh without the emotional weight of the past. She mistook that freedom for healing, not realizing that healing doesn't come from absence, it comes from understanding, and that takes time. At first, her memories of you were filtered through frustration, through the arguments, the tension, the final silence. That's normal. When people walk away, they don't carry the full story with them. They carry fragments, the parts that justify their decision, the emotions that support the narrative they need in order to feel right. It's a kind of emotional defense mechanism, and it works, for a while. But time is not on her side, not when it comes to memory. Because the brain doesn't just remember people for who they were in totality, it remembers people for how they made us feel, especially in their best moments. That's the paradox. That's why even the most complicated relationships can haunt us, not because we want the dysfunction back, but because the best parts refuse to fade. We don't remember people the way they were. We remember them the way they felt when they were at their best. So the man she once saw as complicated becomes the man who made her laugh when she didn't want to smile, the one who knew how to hold her without asking what was wrong, the one who saw something beautiful in her when she only saw flaws. The little things, the way you rested your hand on her lower back when guiding her through a crowd, the way you paused to listen even when she didn't have the words yet, all those things, once overlooked, become priceless. And suddenly, the version of you she remembers isn't the one who was human and flawed and hurt. It's the one who was present, kind, deep, the one who knew her rhythm without needing instruction. You shift in her mind from the man she walked away from to the man she never thought she'd lose. She doesn't choose to remember you this way. It's involuntary. It's what memory does when absence creates space and emotional weight builds quietly. A song you used to play, a scent in a passing crowd, a photo she never deleted. The trigger doesn't matter. The impact does, because every time that memory surfaces, it's coated in meaning now. Meaning that wasn't there when she was too close to see it. It's only after you're gone that she starts to realize something deeper. You weren't just someone she loved. You were a reference point, a mirror, a moment in her life when she felt seen in a way she may never feel again. Scarcity creates value, not artificial value, emotional value. That's why your absence matters, because while you were there, available, consistent, present, your love was like oxygen. She breathed it in without noticing. But when you're no longer accessible, when you've stopped trying, stopped chasing, stopped reacting, she feels the void, and she starts to understand the depth of what she left behind. You're no longer part of her present, but you're not gone either. You live in her comparisons, in her hesitation, in the pause she takes when another man says something that doesn't sound quite as thoughtful, in the way she waits for a gesture that feels as natural as yours did, but it never comes, because those things weren't gestures, they were who you were. You're not just a memory, you're the standard she'll measure the next man against. And she may not admit this, most won't. But comparison is inevitable when something was once real. Every new man brings a moment of excitement until he doesn't understand her silence the way you did, until he misreads her anxiety as drama rather than a signal for comfort, until he doesn't catch the nuance in her tone the way you used to. That's when the measuring tape comes out and your ghost starts to fill the room. She won't text you about this. She won't say, "I miss the way you knew me." But it'll show in her delay to attach to someone new. In the distance she feels even when she's not alone. That's the burden of having once had something real. Everything after feels slightly off, slightly hollow, like it's missing a center. That's the weight of emotional presence. And the ironic part? The man she once found too available is now the man she realizes was the safest place she ever knew. Because that's what happens when emotion rewrites memory. Not to lie, but to refine. To reveal what was hidden by proximity and noise. And now she sees it. You were never needy. You were consistent. You weren't controlling. You were grounded. You weren't too emotional. You were invested. But she had to lose that rhythm to understand the music it created. And now that it's silent, the silence echoes louder than the noise ever did. She begins to understand something she didn't see clearly before. You weren't just part of her story. You were a chapter that shaped her. You weren't perfect, but you were real. And real stays with people longer than ideal ever could. And by the time that realization forms into regret, it's too late. Because now, you're not waiting. You're not trying to be remembered. You're busy becoming a man who no longer needs to be. And that's when it hurts the most, for her. She didn't realize you were irreplaceable until the world showed her that no one else feels quite like home. And that's the moment when memory stops being nostalgia. It becomes truth, and truth never lets go. 2. She feels the loss when you go silent. She didn't expect to lose you when she walked away. Not really. In her mind, leaving didn't mean letting go completely. It meant putting you on pause. It meant closing a door she could always return to if the world didn't feel as exciting as she hoped. You were still in her back pocket, the steady one, the forgiving one, the man who always made space for her, even when she no longer offered the same in return. That's the illusion people fall into. They confuse availability with permanence. They believe that the kind of love that's been patient and unconditional will stay that way forever. And so she left with quiet confidence. Not in herself, but in you. She believed that if she ever changed her mind, you'd be right there. That your heart would still be on standby. That your door would open the moment she knocked. Until it didn't. Until the message she expected never came. Until the story she told herself, that you would always be within reach, started to unravel. Because you didn't chase. You didn't explain. You didn't plead. You let the silence stretch long enough for it to shift from tension to truth. You didn't block her. You didn't hate her. You just disappeared. And that's when it hit her. The realization wasn't loud, but it was sharp. It didn't come with drama, but with finality. They don't feel the cost of leaving until access is revoked. When you were silent for a day, she assumed you were upset. When it stretched into a week, she figured you'd reach out soon. But when it became a pattern, when days became weeks, and your presence was no longer part of her reality, the silence began to echo louder than any argument ever did. That's when the space she thought she wanted turned into absence she didn't know how to carry. Because silence, when it's real, speaks. And what it says is simple. He's not waiting. He's not wondering. He's not trying to be chosen anymore. He's gone, not just in body, but in spirit. She doesn't feel watched or checked up on or subtly pursued. She feels nothing. And that's terrifying, because it means she lost something she didn't expect to lose. What they thought was optional, your attention, your loyalty, becomes unavailable. And that's the real regret. It's not that the relationship ended, it's that you stopped being the version of yourself who would have done anything to make it work. That man, the one who fought for her peace more than his own pride, the one who showed up without being asked, the one who still believed in the possibility of us, he's no longer there. Now she has to face the echo of everything she once dismissed, the consistency she took for granted, the texts she ignored, the emotional labor you carried without complaint. All of it, gone. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started caring about yourself more. Let her feel the weight of losing access to the version of you who would have done anything to make it work. There's a quiet kind of pain that comes with that realization, the kind that doesn't scream, but lingers. It shows up when she sees your name and doesn't know whether to message you or sit with the ache. It creeps in when a new man texts her, and it doesn't feel the same. It lives in the moments when she wishes you'd break the silence, just once, just to prove you're still holding on. But you don't. And in that stillness, she finally begins to feel the loss. The loss of not just a relationship, but a presence. A presence that was soft, grounded, and real. A presence that was always there, until it wasn't. A presence that wasn't demanding, but dependable. That didn't need to be loud to be known. The kind of presence you only truly understand once it's gone. And that's what makes the silence so devastating, because the absence isn't empty. It's full of everything she once had access to, full of the love she didn't recognize in time, full of the steadiness she mistook for convenience, full of the man who showed up again and again until he finally didn't. She won't say it out loud. She may never send the message, but she feels it every time she wonders what you're doing now, who you've become, and whether you still think of her at all. She'll feel it in the quiet moments, in the comparisons, in the slow realization that she didn't just lose you. She lost something solid, something rare. And the silence, it was never punishment. You didn't go quiet to hurt her. You went quiet because the noise was no longer serving your peace. Because continuing to speak into someone who stopped listening is no longer an act of love. It's an act of self-abandonment. The silence became your boundary. It became your healing. It wasn't punishment. It was protection. It was clarity. And now she knows. She didn't just walk away from a man. She walked away from the only version of love that never asked her to be perfect, only present. And that is what she'll carry. 3. Her mind says, "I'm fine," but her heart knows better. She told herself she was done. She told her friends she was relieved, lighter, finally free. She looked in the mirror and repeated the same words like a mantra. "This is what I needed. I made the right choice. And at first, that story worked. Because stories always work best when they're fresh, when the pain is still numb, when the distractions still feel like freedom, and when the silence hasn't had time to set in. But silence doesn't just sit there, it grows, it breathes, it starts to echo, and eventually it begins to reflect. That's when the weight comes back. Not all at once, but in slow waves she didn't expect. The moment she walks into a room and reaches for her phone to text you, then remembers there's no reason to. The nights when she feels something but has no one safe enough to say it to. The moments of quiet when the world pauses and there's no one to share it with. That's when the war begins, not outside her, but inside. She might be laughing in photos. She might be posting with confidence. She might even be dating someone new. But inside, there's a split forming between what she tells the world and what she feels when the world isn't watching. Because walking away from someone doesn't mean you stopped caring. It just means you stopped trying, and that's a very different thing. While her mouth said it was over, her heart never quite caught up. In the beginning, she didn't need to question the story she built. It was clear. It was clean. It made sense. He wasn't right for me. I wasn't happy. I needed space. She said those words enough times to believe them. But something changed when you didn't play your part. She expected you to protest, to reach out, to unravel, to remind her she was still wanted, because that's what would have made her decision easier to justify. Seeing you struggle, seeing you try to hold on, seeing that you needed her more than she needed you. That would have confirmed everything she wanted to believe. She expected you to plead, but when you didn't, it forced her to sit with the raw, unfiltered reality. But you didn't do any of that. You didn't beg, you didn't push, you didn't argue with her version of the story. You just let her go, fully, with clarity and without resistance. And that silence, that calm detachment, it broke the narrative. Because now she had nothing to push against, nothing to use as proof that walking away was right. What she saw instead was unsettling. A man who didn't collapse. A man who respected her decision without diminishing his own worth. A man who didn't try to win her back, not because he didn't care, but because he cared enough to let her go. You became a mirror, one that didn't distort, one that didn't argue, one that showed her something she wasn't prepared to see. Maybe the story she told herself no longer makes sense. Now she's left with a quiet confusion. The version of you she tried to shrink in her mind, the one she claimed was too emotional, too intense, too difficult, has been replaced by the version that doesn't need her anymore. The man who didn't fight to be seen because he already knew his value. And now that she sees you differently, she starts to question herself in ways she can't explain. She wonders if she left too fast, if she misunderstood your depth, if the discomfort she once blamed on you was really her own internal restlessness, her inability to sit with someone who loved her more deeply than she was ready to receive. That thought scares her, not because she wants to admit it, but because it might be true. And the most painful part? She knows. Deep down, even through the noise, even through the justifications and distractions, a part of her knows she didn't walk away from just anyone. She left someone who never truly left her heart. You still live there, in the moments she can't name, in the feelings she can't explain. Not because she wants you to, but because love doesn't die the moment someone leaves. Sometimes it gets buried. Sometimes it hides beneath pride or fear or timing. But it lingers. She won't show that wound. She won't speak it aloud. But it's there. It shows up in the pause before she responds to someone new. In the silence after she laughs but doesn't feel known. In the quiet regret that builds when she realizes that none of this, none of the freedom, the novelty, the attention, feels like the peace you gave her without asking for anything in return. That's the wound she carries, the one no one sees, the one no one comforts, the one that says he didn't fight to prove he was worthy because he already knew he was. He didn't try to fix what she broke because he refused to break himself just to be chosen. He let her go. And that was the most powerful thing he could have done. And now, even if she never says it, even if she never texts, even if she pretends she's fine, you'll always be the quiet question in her heart. What if I left the right one? And that question, once it's planted, never really goes away. 4. Regret grows slowly, then hits all at once. On the surface, she seems okay, maybe even thriving. She's posting with energy, laughing in photos, surrounded by friends or someone new. She's filling her calendar with plans, checking off boxes, dinners, trips, hobbies, events. It looks like she's moved on, like she's never looked back. And for a while, maybe she even believes that herself. But distraction isn't healing. It's just borrowed time. And deep down, even in the middle of all the noise, something quieter is taking shape. Not regret in its final form, but the slow, creeping outline of it. Because regret doesn't strike in the middle of chaos. It waits for stillness. It waits for her guard to drop. And then, like water behind a dam, it builds. Regret doesn't rush. It builds. At first, it's just a fleeting thought. You cross her mind when she hears a certain song, or when someone says your name, or when she walks past a place that used to mean something. But the thought doesn't stay. It passes like a cloud. Then it happens again. This time it stays a little longer. She wonders what you're doing now, if you're still angry, if you've changed, if you still think about her. But she shrugs it off, tells herself it's just curiosity, not feeling. Then one day she's alone. Maybe she's sitting in a car waiting for a light to turn. Maybe she's walking through the grocery store and sees something you used to buy. Maybe she wakes up on a quiet Sunday morning and realizes for the first time in weeks that she doesn't feel seen by anyone in her life. And just like that, you're no longer a thought. You're a presence, a weight, a mirror. You became a mirror she can't escape. She doesn't reach for her phone. She doesn't speak your name. But internally, something shifts. Because regret doesn't always come in the form of missing you. Sometimes it comes in the form of missing who she was around you. And that realization cuts deeper. You were the safe place. The one who knew her in the in-between moments. The ones that didn't need performance. You were the man who saw the version of her that even she had trouble holding on to. And your silence now only makes that memory louder. Your absence becomes your most powerful presence. That's the paradox. When you were there, she didn't feel the weight of your presence because it was consistent, dependable, always showing up. But now that you're gone, that absence isn't neutral. It's full of everything she used to have access to and now realizes she can't get back. She's haunted not by something tragic, but by something true. She thought you'd wait, that you'd always be available, that you'd somehow remain in the background of her life like a safety net. But you didn't. You didn't leave angry. You didn't leave bitter. You just left fully. And that kind of peace, when it comes from strength, not pride, is unforgettable. She's the one now haunted by the stillness. Maybe she still smiles in public. Maybe she's even with someone new. But deep down, every new connection becomes a quiet comparison. And what she starts to realize is that no one quite makes her feel the way you did, not because you were perfect, but because you were real. You knew her rhythms. You gave without needing to be seen for it. You loved her in ways that didn't demand attention, but offered safety. And that's what she misses now. Not the drama, not the memories, not the title. She misses the space to be herself without armor, the feeling of being known without having to explain, the version of you who made her feel more secure, more seen, more held, even when she didn't know how to ask for it. She's the one carrying the weight of that realization. And by the time that weight turns into clarity, it's too late. You've grown, not in bitterness, but in direction. You've built something she no longer has access to. You've reclaimed your peace, not as a punishment to her, but as a return to yourself. By the time regret kicks the door in, you'll already be gone, not bitter, not broken, but better. That's what stings the most, not that she left, but that you didn't need to come back. You didn't try to prove anything. You didn't try to replace her to show her what she lost. You didn't react in rage or desperation. You simply moved forward, with stillness, with clarity, with quiet strength. And in doing so, you became the one thing she didn't expect you to become: irreplaceable. Because the man who chooses peace over performance, silence over begging, and growth over revenge is the man who lingers far longer than the one who shouts his pain. He's the man she will remember, not in chaos, but in clarity. And when regret finally arrives, it won't knock. It'll enter like it owns the place, because in a way, it always has. If you're going through this right now, let me tell you something straight. You don't have to chase closure. You don't have to explain your worth. And you don't have to stay in the shadow of a woman who needed to lose you to understand what she had. Her regret may not come today. It might not come tomorrow. But time doesn't erase men like you. It reveals them. Because memory rewrites. Silence stings. Doubt creeps in. And regret. It builds slow and quiet, until one day it screams. She may never say it out loud, she may never send the message, but she'll feel it every time something reminds her of what she once called enough, and now sees as irreplaceable. And the reason it hits her harder over time isn't because you changed who you were. It's because you stopped giving it away for free. You walked away with dignity. That's power. So here's the lesson, brother. You're not meant to convince someone to love you. You're meant to become the kind of man who doesn't need to be convinced of his own value. When you stop chasing and start building, the world doesn't forget you. It adjusts to you. And she, the one who left, she'll remember you in ways she never expected. Because you didn't just disappear. You became the standard. Now, keep walking. Your peace is louder than any explanation. And she hears it. Every single day. If something in this message touched a place within you that words rarely reach, let it stay with you. Let it guide the way you move forward. Not from reaction, but from strength. Like this video. Subscribe to Stoic Station. Share your thoughts below. I'd truly love to hear them. I'll be right here when you're ready for more. Until then, keep walking with quiet, unshakable certainty.